There we are. Here is another episode of Changing Lanes. Today we're changing lanes with Sam Gibson. Sam is an emotional eating coach and has been on one hell of a journey over the years. Sam has, been on a journey. So we're going to kind of walk through that today. And Sam's taught me a lot over the years. So I want to kind of share the learnings and the impact that Sam's had with me with you guys. So you're welcome. Sam, how are you doing today?
I'm all right. I'm a little bit tired of a tough week, tough month. All good stuff though. But I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Amazing. So let's take it back to the start. Kind of you like you've done a lot of things, you've tried a lot of things. So especially from the part of the country where you're from, leave school, get yourself a trade, an apprenticeship. Should we start there?
Yeah, we can do. Yeah, you're right in saying that. I don't just think it's my part of the country, the northeast. I think it's just a traditional British kind of working class thing. You leave school and then you've got to get yourself sorted. You've got to get yourself set up. Because I think most people, let's say 90% of people, just making that number up, but it's a good accurate estimate. 90% of people are just, they live to work, or they work to live rather, they work to live. It's just about you leave school, you get married, you have kids, you get a mortgage, you get a job, and that's it. And if you're lucky, you'll get a week holiday once a year to Mallorca. And if you're lucky, you'll retire at 65 and have 20 years of retirement. I think that's just the unconscious, the collective unconscious that we have as a society. And obviously, when I left school at 16, 17, that was kind of the trap that I fell into very quickly, very early on in my life. I guess this theme ties in with your podcast of changing lanes. Very early on in my life, something deep within me, whether it's intuition, whether it's a gut feeling, I don't know, just told me that that's not what I wanted to do. I experienced that for the first year of leaving school, got an apprenticeship, got into engineering, absolutely hated it. And I guess the first act of courage that I ever had, which kind of is my whole personality now, would be very disagreeable, being very different. Like I hate the same. I hate people doing all of the same stuff. Like I like to be a bit of a black sheep. I thrive on it. I guess my first act of like rebelling against the system was 17-year-old. I came back from college one day and I went to I call her my mum. You guys will call her mum. So I went to my mum and my dad and went, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not doing engineering. I'm going to college, the local college, a different college, and I'm going to do sport. And I want to either become maybe a PE teacher or just a personal trainer. I want to do something in sport. That's what I want to do. That didn't go down well. That did not go down well. I probably got the silent treatment for about 6 months. However, that stands out. I'll always tell that story because that stands out the first time in my life when I was kind of, this path was laid out for me. You leave school, get a trade, you get a job, and that's what you do. And that just didn't feel right to me. Now, I'm not a big fan of always just following your feelings. I think there has to be some logic and some fact to determine the path that you take. Because if we all just follow our feelings, you know what I mean? Like that's not good. That's what children do. Adults don't follow feelings. We listen to feelings and we interpret them, but we shouldn't just always follow them blindly. But that was like the time in my life when I was like, I just don't feel like this path. There's something deep within my bones. I can't explain it, but this doesn't feel right. And I was brave enough to rebel in that moment. It was rebel against my parents because up until 17-year-old, I just went along with what they told me. And I think that's what any child, I mean, you're not a child at 17, but you kind of are. You're in that, emotionally you're a child, but physically you're not, so you're kind of still a child. Emotionally you're a child. That was probably the first time in my life I ever rebelled, but not rebelled in a counterproductive way, rebelled in a productive way. And that set me off on a chain reaction. I'm 30 now, so that was what, 13 years ago. And that decision proved to be correct.
Amazing ways. Like I said, so you go to college, you get your level three PT. What happens next?
So I guess I include college with the whole university thing as well. So you go to university, you get three years for your degree. I was at 2 years at college to get a B Tech. So I guess in the span of 5 years, from like 17-year-old to like 22, 23, I guess it was. I obviously went to college, got a B Tech qualification that in sports science or whatever it was. That gave me the grades or whatever you needed to go to university. Then I did a bachelor's degree. And I was still just following maybe the system's plan of instead of getting a trade and getting a job, it was like go to college, go to university, get a degree. I've definitely got my thoughts on that now about how that's probably not the best route for a lot of people. I'll get into that, but that's what I followed at the time. So I did my studying. I got well versed in anatomy, physiology, obviously personal training qualification. I wouldn't say I turned it into a career though until maybe 2 years after I left university. So I would say the first identity crisis that I experienced in my life was like 2017, 2018 time. So I had unrealistic expectations of going to university, getting a degree, and then I would just walk into a job. And I had 4 or 5 interviews, two interviews with 2 universities actually to work in their sports department. I had an interview to work full time in a local gym, and I thought maybe that's the route I can go down. And obviously the same feedback was, oh, we enjoyed you, we liked you, you got the qualifications, but don't really have any experience. At that point, I'd had a job. The only job I had was working in a college gym, but I was what was called a casual member of staff, which meant that when people were off, I covered. That meant when people had holidays, I covered. So there was no guarantee. It was a 0 hour contract. I think my basic rate of pay was actually £21 a week because I covered, I believe, 4 hours a week. It was Sunday morning for 2 hours and it was Monday evening for 2 hours when one of the staff members had like a something else going on in the college department I covered. So it was only 4 hours a week of work, which worked out about £21. I think it was £7.30 an hour. And that was my only experience of work. Never had a job outside of that. The apprenticeship I did wasn't really a job. It was more of a learning on the trade kind of thing that would have turned into a job if I never quit. So that was my only experience of a job. So I had a lot of the qualifications. Employers are looking for real world experience. Well, I left university, and I guess my unrealistic expectation, because I'd followed that society's pattern, go to college, get a job, or get a qualification, rather, then you get a job. I didn't, and I was skint. I was broke, you know. I was now living in my overdraft. I left university, and a 12 month went by without doing anything. I was kicking my heels, and I would say that I slipped into a bit of a depressive episode. I started having panic attacks in this period of time. It was certainly I was certainly not doing well mentally. Some other challenges in my life that I'm sure I can get into, and that's when I had my first like bit of an identity crisis. And so, what am I doing? Like I'm so behind in life. I was comparing myself to other people a lot. I was doubting myself. I was thinking, going back to that decision I made at 17, should I just have got a job? Should I just have, just went into the system? Like 23-year-old man kind of living at home, having to knock on his mum's door, in the morning, be like, can I have a fiver to get my hair cut, mama? I feel like a bit of a tramp, I haven't had my hair cut in 6 weeks, like it was a bit embarrassing. And maybe I shouldn't be embarrassed by that, but at the time I was. A lot of my mates were flying, so I thought, that they had cars, they were driving, they had jobs, they were wearing designer clothes, they were going out every weekend, and there's me, just like I get £21 a week, and I've got to decide between can I afford to go to McDonald's for a coffee,
At times of
can I
change.
afford to get a bus pass? Like that was the biggest decision. I wasn't driving at the time. It was like this bus pass, this weekly bus pass for Stagecoach took me all around the local vicinity in South Shields, got me to where I needed to be. 15 quid. So that was 3/4 of my weekly wage on this bus pass. And then I'm like, what the hell do I do? So I built up a bit of debt, not loads, but when you're about £1,000 in debt, and when you've got no money coming in, that's a scary place to be. That's a scary place to be. So that was when I kind of decided, right, I don't think the universe is telling me something. Make up your own thing. And that's when I decided to go all in on the personal training. I took an absolute shot on the dark. A few, and I call this blind luck, right? A few people who I'd never spoken to in a few years, who I knew from school, reached out to us randomly just at this time that I had this crisis where I was getting knocked back for every single job. I was just broke. I was having panic attacks. I was depressed, and I was struggling. I was struggling. Just after this kind of period, a couple of people reached out and was like, "Sam, are you doing personal training at all?" But at the time, I wasn't. I stopped posting about it because I got rejected that many times, and I had a couple of clients that never stuck with it, and then I just ended up giving it up temporarily. I was like, "Yeah, sure. What do you want? I want to train 3 times a week." I just like plucked the price out of my you know what, and went, "I'll train you 3 times a week for 200 quid a month." And they were like, "Yeah, sure." Within a month, Harvey, I'm not even kidding. I got 10 clients like that within a month, £200 a month. So I went from nothing to making 2 grand a month doing personal training. I was like, "Whoa, this is amazing." Like, I just went all in on it, and I've never stopped since then. Here I am now, 8 years later, 8 years later. Obviously, it's snowballed into something different, But there you go. So the big lesson I learned was sometimes when life isn't giving you what you want, you've got to create it. So for me, it was when I'm getting knocked back. I was even getting knocked back by Asda and Lidl. I was that desperate, and they were going, "Sorry, you're overqualified because you got degrees." They know people who apply for jobs to Asda who have got degrees. They're doing it as a stopgap. They're not stupid. You know what I mean? You're obviously doing it temporarily, but that's what it was. So it's a bit of a gamble. They're not going to enroll someone for 6 months and then have to find a replacement because they know it's only short term. So yeah, I was just like, the breakdown I was having was, if you're sitting around waiting for an opportunity to fall in your lap, and that was the realization that I had, you've got to go and create it. And if I never made that decision to go for it, like, was that luck? Those people reaching out, maybe a little bit, but that coincided with this mental shift that I had when I was like, fuck getting a job, do your own thing, become a personal trainer. You're already qualified, you've already done it before, you just never stuck with it. Start posting on social media every day. Start reaching out to people. Start advertising your services. Doesn't matter how small it is. I was comparing myself with some other local PTs around here who were literally like smashing it. And I was like, well, I'm a million miles away from them. So what's the point in trying? But what's wrong with just getting one client, training them 3 times a week? What's wrong with just getting 2 clients? What's wrong with coaching your friends for free to build up some testimonials about how good you are and then advertising your services? I did all that. So there you go. So that was kind of how I transformed, transformed into becoming a personal trainer, creating my own business. It was basically along the lines of, no one else has given me a job, so I might as well make my own.
Yeah, no, amazing, mate. Like there's so many parallels to like my own journey when I first started out. Again, I did one of the reasons, and again, it's hindsight's a wonderful thing. I did my level 3 is a bit of I was working in like a leisure center anyway. In those sort of things, you either go into management or like the fitness PT side of things. So I chose that path. Um, and yeah, did my level 3, went to uni, was going to train people at uni, or work in the gym. I'm going to get paid more in a gym and doing classes rather than doing like stacking shelves in Tesco's or pulling pints at like a student bar or whatever. That's the reason I started. Now, probably not the best reason to start a career of qualification. The whole uni thing didn't work out for me. I came back home and kind of fell into that kind of like PT career. So like I can totally relate to that, and big on like the comparison of like, oh, but he does this and she does that. Yeah, like you said, it's coming back to actually like just focus on me. And when I started doing that, that's when, like yourself, I started to fly. Like in the early part of my career was, yeah, just kind of like blocking out the noise and focusing in on what like I'm doing, not what he, she, they, whatever, comparing myself to them are doing.
Yeah, I think comparison. I mean, there's a famous quote, Eleanor Roosevelt, I believe, said this: comparison's a thief of joy. And I do agree with that. But also, I can look at that and say, well, sometimes it depends on the perspective or the angle of comparison. There's definitely negative forms of comparison, and that's always looking at what's missing in me compared to that person. Well, that's disempowering comparison. But also there's empowering comparison. So what I really realized is, like, I'll always compare myself to other people, but I was comparing myself negatively. I was looking at people who were basically doing what I wanted to do, who were killing it, and that made me feel inferior. So I was envy. That created envy and jealousy within me, and those are not the natural personality traits, the natural human emotions. You can't get rid of those, but you certainly can become very, very, you can become very disempowered by those feelings. And if those feelings are left unchecked, there's a bit of a dark side of them, you know. So what I ended up doing was going, right, how can I compare myself to people in different ways? Well, I started looking at these same people who used to create jealousy and envy in me, and went, what are they doing that I'm not? Because that's why you create jealousy and envy. Jealousy and envy is just not asking yourself the right question about why that feeling's there. So when I realized why that feeling's there, I was like, well, why am I jealous and envy? And instead of making it about, I'm not as good as them and internalizing it like a little child, because that's what a little emotionally immature child does, because that's what we all did as children. We internalize everything. I was like, get over yourself. Like, seriously, get over yourself, Sam. You got to have these high level conversations with yourself. What are they doing that you're not? And I realized the reason I was jealous and envious is because they were taking action and I wasn't. So, an old saying goes, don't reinvent the wheel. The wheel is round, Harvey, right? It's amazing, isn't it? Doesn't need to be square, doesn't need to be triangle. It's round. So I always say this to myself: if you are struggling to do something, whether it's a career, whether it's to lose weight, whether it's to accomplish a goal, whether it's to solve a problem, there'll be someone out there within within eyes reach, if that's a word, within your vicinity, that you can look at and go, they're doing what I want to do. What are they specifically doing? What are the specific actions that they are taking that I am not? And then emulate them. Don't reinvent the wheel, just emulate someone who's already doing what you're doing. Doesn't mean directly copy, it means copy their framework, put your own spin on it. Be your own unique self and express yourself in your way, but follow their framework. And when I started doing that, life got dramatically better. So I actually like comparison to other people. It's just got to be done with a subtle shift. A lot of people are in that internalized kind of emotionally immature form of comparison, which is just creating envy and jealousy. And it's quite a dark side of human nature. Like, we all should admit that we get envious and jealous of people.
1,000,000%.
We all do. It's a normal human nature. We shouldn't be ashamed to have these conversations, because when we suppress these traits, that's when the shadow comes out. The dark side of human nature comes out. Where this is why people I don't know, if you're on social media, you'll know this yourself. There's always people commenting on your posts, just talking shit, just making up bullshit, just digging you out for no reason, just commenting on your videos and just like verbally attacking you. And you're like, whoa, what's this person's problem? I don't even know you. And now I'm looking at it going, I know what this person's problem is. They're unhappy in their own personal life and they're just projecting. So when you are not checking your own dark emotions, you will project that onto the world. And it's obvious for me to see that now, because I was doing the same thing. I used to talk shit about those people who I used to compare myself to. You know, I used to publicly rant on social media about these people. What did that say about me? I was projecting, right? If you go on my social media now, you'll not see me doing any ranting whatsoever, because I know that is, first of all, it's pointless. First of all, people will just simply look at you and say, well, you're a bit of an angry, you know what, aren't you? But also, how is that going to help me? How is that going to help me? So when I have thoughts now, I'm like, oh God, I'm comparing myself to these people. I'm like, okay, where's that coming from? The reason I'm jealous of this person, or the reason I'm comparing myself, the reason I'm envious, they're clearly doing something that I'm not. So what is it that I'm not doing? It's this. Through your own dark thoughts, when you inquire deeper into your own dark thoughts and emotions, you actually find solutions to your problem. There can't be darkness without light. There can't be light without darkness. But just applying that mindset, it really allowed me to pivot at crucial moments in my life when I needed to pivot, because I was asking the right questions. So yeah, comparison, it's not all bad.
Definitely not. And there's thinking about it now, I notice a very clear correlation between where I'm at in my life and the level of the type of comparison that I'm doing. Like I said, I can look at someone who I admire, or like you said, that you want to emulate, or who is doing really well. Like, there is clearly something there. There's a level of inspiration available. There's a level of something that you could potentially, like I said, take your own spin off and work through that. And like I said, I know I'm so much more likely to do that if I'm in a good headspace, if I'm, hitting my good habits, and moving my body, sunlight, eating well. I feel like I've got something I'm looking forward to, taking time to spend time with friends and my partner and my family, and then also looking at I'm also doing like my things, stuff that I want to do, and I having my alone time. When I'm doing things like that, I know that I'm so much more likely to be like, yeah, okay, I see person A, like, what are they doing that I could potentially emulate? Is there a way that I could put my spin on it? How could I deliver that message in my way? Versus like that, like, almost bitter, twisted, when those things start to slide, everything kind of just goes backwards, and it doesn't, and you're just in this kind of like constant. For me, anyway, I feel like it's really like angsty, prickly kind of state.
Yeah. It's a terrible energy to be in.
Like I said, you just get caught in that, and then it's like the anger, like you said, anger, resentment, and it's just a horrible place to be, and nothing good comes of it.
Well, I'm, big on this now. Some people might think I'm a bit of a hippie, woo-woo, but vibration and energy is a real thing. Like, you'll know this. You walk in a room, right, and you see someone, and just by the look on their face, the tonality, body language, they lift you, and you're like, oh, I'm glad to be in this guy's room, or this person's room. I'm glad to be in the room with them, rather. And then other times you walk in and you can put the tension life. Nothing's been said. This person hasn't verbally said anything, but you can just tell the body language, the energy, the face, you know that. And I had to check myself. And people noticed that about me in the past because that's the energy I was given. So I used to get angry that people would reject me, whether it was personal training or, job interviews, this and that. But if I was carrying this angsty, angry energy, the law of attraction is a real thing, Harvey. We don't attract what we deserve. And this is where people really struggle with the law of attraction. They're like, you've just got to think positive thoughts. You've just got to manifest. And I'm like, that's all shit, right? What it is you get what you are. And if what you are is someone who compares yourself daily to other people, makes yourself feel inferior, you're going to create that angry, frustrated, unmet expectation energy. Then you're going to attract circumstances. You're going to literally project that energy onto the world, and a manifestation is going to occur in real time. The results that you're getting in your life across the board, they're an extension of you. They're an extension of you, and it's a real thing. You've got to check your energy first. So, like I say, comparing yourself to other people, sometimes you need to be triggered by other people to kick you into action. Like every transformational story I've ever seen started from a place of I'm sick of this shit and I need to do something about it. Not, you know what? I feel wonderful. I just want to make my life better. That's crap. I think people think this emotional awakening or this spiritual awakening that you have is all beautiful and you wake up one day and, the animals off Snow White are in your room doing all your dishes and Tinkerbell off Peter Pan sprinkling fairy dust on you and you lift off to the, like what's all that crap? Like you've been watching too many movies. The spiritual awakening is rock bottom. The spiritual awakening is rock bottom when you go, it's my fault. It's up to me to change. It's up to me to take action because I'm the one who's in control of my destiny. So yeah, I think these little breakdowns that we have, these little emotional patterns that we recognize, just gotta do something about it, man. Like it's down to us really. This is not saying we can't get support and help. I never achieved anything without support and help. I've had relationship coaches, I've had psychotherapists, I've had business coaches, I've had mindset coaches, I've had writing coaches who've helped me get better at writing. Who, not how. Like if I'm struggling with something, I go, well, who's doing what I would like to be doing? Who's a couple of chapters ahead of me that I can learn from? And that's one of the best attitudes you could ever have in your life. It's this emotional energy of abundance. No matter what I'm going through, there is someone or something out there who could help me move forward to where I need to be. But that energy is a real thing, and you don't attract what you deserve in this world. No one deserves to be traumatized. No one deserves to be rejected. No one deserves to, be financially broke. No one deserves to go through a mental health crisis. But are we not talking about the nitty gritty conversations that we need to be having? It's like, well, what got you in that situation? What actions have you been taking? What energy have you been walking around with? What dark emotions have you not been listening to? Because our natural human response when we feel an emotion like shame, negative comparison, jealousy, anger, frustration, it's to suppress it, just to push it down. Then we end up in this internal battle of, am I a bad person for having these thoughts? But then these thoughts persist, and then you lose yourself to the thoughts and you just give in to them. And now you're in this internal tug of war with yourself between, am I a good person? Am I a good person who has bad thoughts? Or am I a bad person who's trying to be good? The reality is we're both. Light and dark exists within all of us. It's just about interpreting those feelings. I honestly think emotions and thoughts, they're just feedback from the universe to let us know where we're at and how we need to course correct and how we need to pivot and what other questions we need to ask.
Yeah, 1,000,000%, mate. Like, that's something that I've certainly kind of got more in tune with recently, is having this awareness of like that bad feeling or the negative emotion, that a negative feeling, that negative situation is, it's not about like knee jerk change as quickly as possible, like try and divert that. He's actually just sitting it for a minute. And like you said, it's having that as like a signal. It's the deeper, like the symptom is never the problem, which is again, that's another Sam special. And we'll get onto that in due course. But yeah, like if we think back to, yeah, it's how do we like divert that attention and that energy as quickly as possible? But actually, like there is such a thing of sitting in it, and it's, even, you might wake up and feel really groggy and just a bit grumpy in the morning, or you might be feeling those things. I've done that where I'm like, right, I'm going to set myself a timer for half an hour. I'm going to sit in it and just like see what festers to the top, see what
Yes.
grows, and then act from that.
Yeah. So what I learned about myself, right, and this is literally a training that I teach my clients, right? I think shame is the most painful emotion. Okay. That is the lowest. It's all about emotional vibration, right? So he's got this chart, right, which has got like every human emotion on this chart, okay? And there's a certain vibration. And they've actually proved this correct in science right now. Like they have done experiments on plants, shall we say, where they've played like nice, spiritual, high frequency noises to plants and they've grew faster. And then they've played rock music and like heavy metal and like words with negative words in and low frequency noises, and it's caused the plants to die, right? So vibration is a real thing. It's a real energy, right? Anyways, there's this emotional vibration chart. Right at the top, you've got enlightenment, which is like the highest possible vibration you can be living at. Now that's hard to be as a human because we're flawed creatures, right? That's like Jesus level, spirituality, okay? But right at the bottom we've got shame. And shame is like the lowest possible vibration. Now shame is a necessary emotion. It's evolved through, basically a million years of us being monkeys and trees to what we are now. Me and you chatting on an iPhone, or a laptop or whatever, like we've evolved, right? We've evolved these complex emotions for a reason, feedback. So shame is necessary, but unchecked shame. Basically, there's four ways that we will try and deal with it because shame is so painful. So shame will be associated with the feeling of this is my fault, or I'm not good enough, or I'll never change, or the world's against me. Shame will be created. You'll feel not good enough, right? And that's where many people are living their life from an emotional frequency part of shame, right? We want to try and get the words of enlightenment and all throughout the emotional vibration chart. We've got these different emotions, apathetic, depression, anxiety, fear. And then courage is like right in the middle. Courage is where it starts to change. It starts going into the plus vibrations rather than the minus ones. But right at the bottom is shame. And through my own personal journey of recognizing, well, what do I do when I feel shame? How do I try and avoid it? It's so painful. What do some of my clients do as well? Essentially, four ways that we cope with it. Number one, we'll either project, and that means we attack others. So when we are ashamed of ourselves, and this is where many people are at in their life, their expectations for life hasn't been met, their relationships haven't worked out. Maybe there's some things from their childhood that are still not resolved. Basically, life hasn't worked out the way they thought. And they're quite bitter, they're quite envious, they're quite frustrated. That's not their fault. But that feeling, if unchecked, will create some disruptions in our psyche and some darkness will come out. One of them is projection. That's where we attack other people. So anyone who's always complaining about other people, always blaming people for how they feel, all that is an attempt to get rid of shame. So it's a coping mechanism for it's projection. Now the other person, another way to do shame or to deal with shame might be the opposite. Instead of projecting it onto the world, we'll internalize it. So internalization, self-attack. This is where we don't take it out on others, but we really take it out on ourselves. We reaffirm those limiting beliefs because the brain has to try and make sense of complex things. So when we don't feel good enough, the brain's so addicted to certainty, it wants to know why we don't feel good enough. Well, it'll be like, well, I'm not good enough because of the way I look. I'm not good enough because my career's not worked out. Not good enough because my relationship's terrible. So that means it's me. I'm not good enough because the world hasn't treated me kindly. I'm not good enough because I'm behind in life compared to my friends. I'm not good enough because this person's better than me. This person's prettier than me. This person's more intelligent. So we'll look at the results we're getting in my life and we'll reaffirm this limiting belief of I'm not good enough. So you'll either project and blame other people for how you feel, or you'll internalize it, reaffirm limiting beliefs, and attack yourself. Both of those are equally disempowering. Yeah. Another two ways that humans process shame in an attempt to get rid of this low energy vibration is withdrawing. So we'll self-isolate, we'll withdraw from the world. This is the doorway to depression, I may add. This is where we'll isolate ourselves, we'll stop seeing people, we'll stop speaking to people, we'll have a fear of being seen, fear of being judged, fear of being criticized. We'll essentially pull back and withdraw from personal relationships. We might stop seeing our friends. The lockdown, we're working from home thing made it very, very easy for these kind of depressive types to completely withdraw from the world as a coping mechanism, and are still suffering with it today. And the other one is just basic avoidance. So withdrawal is more about avoiding people and avoiding social interactions because we don't want to feel shame, so we'll just isolate ourselves. With avoidance, it's more on the specific tasks. Like we'll avoid things that we should be doing. We'll avoid the housework. We'll avoid doing the dishes. We'll avoid going to the gym. We'll avoid getting organized because then it'll reaffirm our bias of, well, I can't. I'm in a bad place. My mental health's not good. Like someone reached out to me the other day who was like going to sign up to one of my programs. I'm desperate. I'm binge eating. I'm struggling. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I need to sort my eating out once and for all. Sent her the payment link. Didn't hear from her in a week. So sometimes people take take time to like, make a decision and whatever. So I just followed up a week later. Hey, what's happening? Like, I want to get you in for your next call. I'm ready to go. Oh, I'm going to wait until my mental health is good. That's what you said to me. I'm sitting here thinking, I'm going to wait until my mental health is good before I make a change. I didn't call her out. I was just like, hey, you know where I'm at. I do only have 2 spaces left this month. So, if you don't want to do it now, I don't know when there's going to be a space, but hey, I'm here when you need it. And I just left it because I realized that person, they were stuck in shame mode, that they were basically avoiding taking action. Because sometimes when we take action, it shows us where we are at in our life, and we don't like to know where we are at. So we like to keep things vague and, oh, I'll just wait and I'll just avoid and I'll just, because it gets us to avoid shame. So that's the 4 ways that we avoid shame. Those are the 4 manifestations of it. We'll either blame other people for how we feel, or we'll blame ourselves and internalize it. We'll avoid basic things that need to be done, and we'll make up an excuse about why we need to avoid them. We're not ready, my mental health's bad, it's not the right time, blah, blah, blah. Or we will completely withdraw and self-isolate. And I've realized that those 4 traits, I can all do those traits. I'm sure you can as well. We all do. But all they are is a person who's not coming to terms with their own shame. They're not dealing with it. They're so frightened of why they feel the way they do that they're not asking the deep questions about, well, how am I responsible for this? Have you ever heard of the my fault theory? Do you know what that is?
Rings a bell. Rings a bell.
I'm probably paraphrasing it, but it's quite a it could be quite counterproductive for some people. This is not me saying you have to like blame yourself for everything, but I'm just like, imagine the things that are going wrong in your life. Let's just play the game. Let's play devil's advocate here. That it's your fault. Everything's your fault, and it's up to you to change. How would you react? That question has got me through so many bad days. I'm like, I'm not going to blame myself, but I'm just going to play devil's advocate, play the game of, if this was my fault, what would I do about it? If I was to blame for the situation, how would I react? And in doing so, I've actually found a solution, whether it was my fault or not. Yeah. So the my fault theory is just like, sign of emotional maturity is basically you have to take responsibility for things that are not your fault. So a bad thing can happen to you, and that's not your fault. You should absolutely not internalize and blame yourself for the thing that's impacted you. But it is your fault if you are not doing anything about it. So it's being able to separate those 2 things. And I think a big sign of emotional maturity is to be able for 2 things to be true. To say, listen, what happened to me isn't my fault, but it is my fault if I'm not doing anything about what happened to me. So you have to have the my fault theory. You don't go on your own with that. You get support, you get help, you ask questions, you have a coach, you have a mentor, you have a spiritual mentor, you have a guide. But basically, if you want your life to get better, you've got to make a decision. You've got to take action. So yeah, that's really helped me in my life, because the 4 ways I'll avoid taking responsibility is through internalization, plus that we do it as humans. So if I want to change that, what's the opposite of all of those things? Take responsibility. Taking responsibility will shift your emotional energy, and you will attract new and better circumstances when you do. If you stay stuck in shame mode, you'll attract more things that reaffirm that internal bias.
Yeah, and like things that you're saying here, like even me right now, it's just feeling. This is the 3rd episode that I've recorded, and every one I'm like, there's such like a level of sense that like I'm to like kind of like verbalize like thoughts and feelings, like what you said about like those the four ways of shame. And like for a tricky chapter I had, like about a year ago, I would never have used the word shame. It totally was.
Anytime you feel inadequate, or you're feeling not good enough, the emotion behind those thoughts is shame. Remember, emotions are felt feelings. Emotions literally mean energy in motion. So again, a sign of emotional maturity is to distinctively separate the thoughts that I'm having. Basically, thoughts are stories, they're narratives that your brain is just putting out there. I'm not good enough. This person's better than me. I'm behind in life. Whatever, picking yourself apart with faults and criticisms. Those are stories that your brain's telling you to try and make sense of this felt feeling. But the felt feeling is an energy, plain and simple. So we have to determine what's the energy behind these thoughts. Shame is always there in the background. And shame is so painful that we'll do anything to avoid it, which is why we get obsessed with the stories that our brain is telling us and not actually deal with the energy system, which is shame, which is maybe apathy. But what's the point? A lot of people are stuck in apathetic minds right now. And when I was depressed and having panic attacks, and like, that's what I realized my panic attacks were. Like, the panic attacks that I was having were actually my unconscious mind trying to wake me up. They're like an alarm bell. It's like you're not doing anything, you're not taking responsibility, you're running away from your problems. So here's some anxiety to try and wake you up. I've never had a panic attack since. Have I felt anxious from time to time when things outside of my control are going against me, when I've been worried about something? Absolutely. I still experience anxiety regularly, but it's never slipped into a panic attack where I've literally convinced myself I'm going to die and I'm literally heart's pounding in my chest and I can't breathe and I feel like I'm going to pass out. That's never happened in a long time because I've taken responsibility.
Amazing. Amazing. Something that we kind of touched on a little bit earlier was about how the symptom isn't necessarily the problem. Now, I know that you work with a lot of people on their emotional eating, and it's something that we've spoken about in the past, like the thing that you're doing, because it's not always necessarily food. It could be another. I don't like the word, but vice, like another thing that you're doing to
Yeah.
numb and negate feeling and a coping mechanism. It's just a coping mechanism. It's like, if I've got a rash, yeah, I can have a cream for it. But, what has caused that? Is it like an allergic reaction? Is there something else in that equation that we just, put in there?
Yeah, let's look at nature, right? I like drawing parallels from Mother Nature. I think Mother Nature is the most powerful force on this planet, right? Energy, again, we learned this in school. Energy can't be created nor destroyed. Everything's chemistry, everything's chemicals, everything's formulas, everything's atoms and particles smashing together to create outcomes, to create life, to create everything, you know? I'm not intelligent enough to explain what lightning is in the sky, but it's something to do with hot air meeting cold air, and then electricity ensues, like this is the world we live in. Everything that we see is some sort of chemical reaction or energy equation. Like you just said, the rash. Okay, well, we can get the cream to treat the rash. Are we asking, well, why is the rash there? I mean, that might be a little bit of a silly example, but that's also the flaws and the problems in the medical system. We don't have to get into that, but really, it's let's treat the symptoms. It's not like, why is this? Like if you go to the doctors and your leg's hanging off, right? You'll stitch you up, you'll sew your leg back on, and send you on your merry way. But then if you come back the next week with your other leg hanging off, that doctor should be like, hang on a second, what are you doing? You were here last week with your leg hanging off. What's going on? I climbed up a ladder and jumped off a 10-foot building. Okay, let's not do that anymore. You broke both your legs now. Like that's a terrible, silly example. I'm being humorous, but you get the idea. That's what should be happening. But as a society, we don't seem to be having this conversation. Like if you go to the doctors and you're generally depressed, do they ask you about what's your marriage like? What was your childhood like? Was there any traumas that you really haven't got over? What about your job? You liking your job right now? What's your diet and nutrition like? No, it's okay. These are the symptoms. Tick, 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 tick. Okay, you qualify for these pills. Here you go. Now, I'm not saying that medication isn't the answer. I think some people need to be medicated. Really, they do. They need a medical intervention to give them a stopgap. But them medications for things like depression, anxiety, they were never supposed to be a long-term thing. What they're supposed to be a therapeutic practice that they used to literally help people who are really struggling, give them some stability, and then we're supposed to work on behavior changes and all that sort of stuff. But we don't do that. So as a society, just generally speaking, Harvey, we are addicted to treating symptoms and not solving them. There's always a root cause for everything. There's always an equation. This plus this equals the outcome. So relating it back to, like you said, or helping people with vices. I always say this, whether it's food that you are struggling with, whether it's alcohol, drugs, social media, spending money. Most people just flip-flop vices their entire life. I certainly have.
Yeah.
I've had problems with food. I've had problems with alcohol. I've had problems with money. I've had problems with definitely social media. I guess even Netflix. Like back in the day when I was depressed, I used to watch like 8 hours of Netflix a day, then wonder why I was depressed. You know what I mean? It's all a symptom of a problem. So these are the conversations that I like having now. It's like, what's going on behind the scenes of your life, in your personal life, that's creating these outcomes? That the symptoms are obvious because you're feeling them and you can see them. But sometimes the root cause, it's either obvious, but you're denying it because it's so scary to accept. So it's easier to obsess over the symptoms, or it's so hidden, it's so deeply buried that you have to bring it out by asking powerful questions. So any vice, let's just say food in this instant, it's a coping mechanism. Yeah. Got a few crazy, amazing quotes that I want to share with you. I've got them written down here, Harvey. Do you mind just talking about them? Right. So here's some things that I've learned and observed in my own research and working with thousands of clients that I have on disordered eating, as well as overcoming my own eating disorder. Food is usually how people from difficult or neglectful homes start soothing themselves. The love they don't get creates an empty hole, and food becomes the way to fill it. Most eating disorders aren't disorders. They're attempts of gaining control after a childhood of betrayal, violation, or emotional neglect. Overeating or not allowing ourselves to eat is an attempt to bury shame, to forget painful memories, or to make sure that no one will look at us and want to violate us again. Behind all disordered eating is rage. It's a desire to disconnect from our bodies because we feel so much shame and disgust. Here's another fascinating but also quite emotional one. Research shows children who experience childhood, emotional, or sexual abuse are 4 times more likely to develop an eating disorder or an addiction. So, when people have addictions or eating disorders or other coping mechanisms, why are we not asking questions like this? Like, what was your childhood like? You know, what what's going on in your life? What happened in the past? What was your relationship with your parents like? What was the emotional modeling that you got shown by your parents? Because behind every addict is a person who cannot regulate their emotions. I was an addict, or I behaved like one because I couldn't regulate my emotions. I struggled with alcohol, food, drugs because I couldn't regulate my emotions. When anxiety came knocking, I was so frightened of it, I'd numb myself with food, or I'd drink alcohol, or I'd smoke weed, or I'd party with my friends, you know, or I'd fill that hole inside of me with, random hookups, going on Tinder, one night stands on night out. It's like it was all a coping mechanism from what? To fill this empty hole in my life because I didn't know how to deal with those feelings. So everything was a distraction from those feelings. That's how we need to treat all addictions. It's like, what are you avoiding? What are you running away from? What are you numbing? What are you suppressing? What are you pushing down? And often when we ask those sorts of questions, we'll be like, well, my childhood wasn't good. I was abused. I was this, I was that. And the studies are out there. 4 times, I've got it written down here. 4 times more likely to struggle with an addiction or an eating disorder if you were physically, emotionally, or sexually abused as a child.
Like, it's such a broad topic, and this is one of the reasons that I was like, I can't in this industry, and I was really struggling with being in the whole fitness game, is because I've got, I'd say I'm by no means an expert, but I have an awareness of this sort of stuff, and very rarely is doing some more squats and eating some protein the solution. Like I said, it's the deeper stuff. It's like I said, it's not having stuff to look forward to, not dealing with the past. It's not asking those questions. Like you were saying there, like what am I avoiding? What am I running away from? Anytime I've sat down and asked myself those sort of questions is where I've noticed the most progress, and that's where I suddenly start to have breakthroughs. And I'm sure similar with yourself. Like one of my big turning points was I was sat in a coffee shop with absolute knowing amount of rage because I couldn't find a coffee shop to sit down in and do some client work, and I couldn't focus, and I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that. And I was sat there at my laptop and open the note section. I've still got it somewhere on my notes on my phone, my computer. Like and I had the journal prompt of like what's pissing me off. But ultimately, when I sat there and wrote and pulled my heart out to myself, that allowed me to essentially, in a roundabout way, ask myself that question and then work out what was going on. Like, why was I feeling this way? Why, like, because there was this unsettled feeling within me. It allowed me to kind of finally verbalize
Yeah.
that deeper thing that I've not been able to get out. That's the first. Obviously, when you're at that point, that's when you can have the turning point to move forward.
Yeah. Well, I totally believe this, that, in the mental health. Oh, I'm struggling with my mental health. What is that? What is that? This is my belief. People can say I'm wrong, but that's normally a result of some form of suppression. Like you said, it took you that point to have a bit of a breakdown to where you ask that question of what's pissing me off. It's most people. Most people are putting up with circumstances that they hate. Again, famous quote. I didn't make up all my information. I've done extensive research. Famous quote, Johann Hari from his book Lost Connections, which, by the way, is the best book ever written on mental health. It'll explain exactly why you're anxious, exactly why you're depressed, and exactly why you're struggling with your mental health. Doctors should be using his framework to start assessing people's mental health rather than Oh, the brain chemistry. That's been debunked, by the way. Brain chemistry is what causes depression. It's absolutely not. It's unmet expectations impacts the brain chemistry. So when you live a life between, I thought my life was going to be here, but actually it's here, that void is what creates depression and anxiety. Depression and anxiety is an energy, it's an emotion that will literally impact you on a physiological level if left unchecked. So what's in the gap between how I want my life to be versus where I'm actually at? And that is why most people are struggling, because basically their life's just not working out the way they thought. Now, two things will need to be done as a result of this: a massive reduction in expectations, because most people are living in fantasy worlds. Unrealistic expectations, like I was. They want things now, they want it fast, they want all of the results without doing the work. And when they don't get it, they throw the toys out of pram like a little baby. We've all been there. But also, what actions do I need to take to close the gap? So if we can simultaneously slightly reduce our expectations to realistic levels, because if we're always unrealistic, it doesn't even matter how many actions we're taking, the goalposts are always going to be moved and we're always going to be living in that void. But be realistic with the expectations that you're actually wanting in your life. Are you being realistic? Yes or no? But let's lower the expectations of the bar. And then where am I actually at? What actions do I need to take to close the gap? That's Johan Harvey's framework, but there is certain things outside of control that we need to be looking at, across the board. But let's look at that word disorder for a second, whether it's anxiety disorder, an eating disorder, a depressive disorder, or whatever many of the labels the medical communities kind of created in the last decade. The word disorder, definition of it means lack of order. If there was rioting going on in the streets right now, what would be the solution? It would be the police, the military, whoever, come in and create order. That's what people want. We want order. We want a functioning society that's predictable, that's routine, that has practices that everyone can get on board with. That's what makes civilizations thrive. Law and order, a collective agreement across the population. This is the way we behave. That's when we thrive, right? So a microcosm is that is looking at us individually. If societies thrive when we have law, order, collective shared values that everyone's on board with, certainty, predictability, we need to create that within us. So what's the opposite of disorder? It's order. How do we create order in our life? We create predictability. We create rituals. We create structure. We get organized. That's how we tackle disordered eating. Because behind anyone who's struggling with their eating habits, whether it's they're eating too much or eating too little, whether it's anorexia, whether it's binge eating disorder, those are a spectrum. They're not one side of the spectrum, one side here, one side there. You'll have extreme right, extreme left, and then they kind of gravitate towards the two. So they kind of go like that. Same politically. It's the same thing politically. If you look at your left wing extremist, they're exactly the same as your right wing fascist. They're the same. They've just got different ideologies, but their collective consciousness is the same. It's the same person, just different things. That's still whatever. Don't want to go off on a tangent, but it's not left, right. It's not a straight line. It's a spectrum. It's an arc, right? So eating disorders are the same. Whether you're eating too much, you're trying to control your emotions because you don't want to feel them. You're avoiding your emotions. Whether you're eating too little, you're also avoiding your emotions by numbing yourself without eating. And you're trying to control your body in an attempt to get rid of those emotions that you feel because you've linked, I feel bad because it's the way I look. So I better control the way I look and then I'll not feel bad. It's still controlling your emotions, whether you're overeating or undereating. So the word disorder, we need to look at that. It's a lack of order. So this just brings me on to a framework that I teach. You probably want to know more about this, and you've heard me speak about this, and your audience will. I've coached thousands of people on their eating habits now, and I've done this framework with every single one of them. Every single person who I've helped with their eating habits was experiencing at least one, if not all, of these what I call voids behind the scenes in their personal life that was creating a lack of order. And their eating disorder was just a manifestation of this internal lack of order. Do you want to hear the framework?
Go for it, mate.
Yeah. Okay, so number one, disconnection from work. We spoke about it before. If you hate your job, it's just going to really impact you. You're going to doubt yourself. You're going to compare yourself to other people. You're going to be exhausted. You're going to be spiritually and emotionally dampened. You're just not going to be thriving. Due to the nature of having to work 30, 40, 50 hours a week, we don't get a lot of time left over. So everyone's had jobs they hated. How much did that impact your mental health? Like we've only got a finite amount of emotional energy. And if 99% of it is being drained by work, we struggle to function. So jobs, we'll have to look at that. It can create a massive lack of order in our life. Number two, disconnection from hobbies and values. If we don't have any other way to express ourselves or to get pleasure, then we're going to be relying on a vice. So one thing I ask a lot of people who struggle with their eating habits, they might say, Sam, I'm binging on a night time. I'm overeating. I'm overweight. I've been like this for years. I'm struggling with my confidence. I'm just desperate. I want to lose weight. I'm struggling. What do I do? I might go, tell me what you like to do to have fun. And that always like catches the person off guard. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, tell me what you like to do to have fun. Where do you get pleasure from in your life? And normally this is the response. They go, there's an awkward silence for about 10 seconds. Listen, I don't really do anything. I'm like, okay, right. So if you sitting down at the end of a hard day, eating crap, watching Netflix is the most exciting part of your day, then you're going to rely on it. We need to create a life where you got something else that's exciting, something that you can do daily, then something better that you can do maybe weekly, something better that you can maybe do every few months. We need to start creating law and order in your life because right now you've got none. You're just relying on your emotions to feel good. And when you don't, you're like, what can I do to get quick pleasure? That's what a vice is. People who are addicted to substances, chemical or emotional, it's because they don't have another way to get pleasure, and in that moment they don't know how to regulate their emotions. So this is the way you treat addiction, whether it's alcohol anonymous, whether it's drug addiction. We have to replace the vice with something else while working on phasing out the vice. You can't just go cold turkey and stop and then go, right, go on then. Same with eating habits. If you've got into a system where you hate your job, you don't do anything, you don't leave the house all week, you're just waiting to go back to work, and your only way to get pleasure is to sit down, watch Netflix, and eat crap on a night time, then you're going to continue doing it. So, in my experience of working with many clients as I have, by getting them to introduce more hobbies in their life, more little things that they can do. It doesn't have to be crazy. It could be 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. They go to this class once a week. They do this thing once a month. They set this goal every couple of months to go to the theatre, to go to the cinemas. I'm talking basic stuff, Harvey, basic stuff. But I've saw a
It's
massive improvement in people's eating habits when they have more going on in their life. So number two, hobbies and values. Number three, intimate connections with other people. I always make this joke in my program. I go, I'm not a relationship coach, but I might as well be. And what I really mean is if you are not getting on with your partner, well, food can take the place of the lover that you don't have. If you don't have a functioning relationship with your parents, food can take the place of a safe, stable relationship with parents you never got. If you don't see anyone, you don't go anywhere, you don't feel a part of a community, you don't see your friends, you don't feel connected, food can take the place of a community that you don't have. Basically, the quality of our mental health is dictated by the quality of our relationships. And when we feel isolated, disconnected, rejected, conflicted, whether there's actual traumas going on in our relationships in real time or past historic, that's going to impact your self-esteem and mental health. Food and any coping mechanism can become a vice to make up for that. So a big part of healing your relationship with food and the disorder in your life is looking at the order in your relationships. Number four, I mentioned it before, but emotional eating is often a trauma response, whether that's physical, emotional, sexual abuse from childhood, whether that's just, you grew up with parents who you had to walk on eggshells around, they couldn't emotionally regulate. Maybe they were emotional eaters as well, so you've learned that from them. It's some sort of trauma response, whether it be mild or extreme. In that moment, using food for comfort is about, I don't know how to regulate my feelings, so I'm going to eat to push those feelings down. If I'm simplifying it, that's what it is. So we have to be looking at our traumas, our limiting beliefs, our past. Again, when someone comes to me who's struggling, I don't want to hear, I already know this, but I don't want them to list what's wrong with me. It's like, I know what's wrong with you. You've explained it very, very well. I'm not going to give you a diagnosis if this is what's wrong with you. What I'm going to do is say, what happened to you? What happened to you? What got you to this point of you struggling the way you are? Because you struggling with the symptoms you've got now is a result of what you have experienced. So I want to know what's happened to people. Number five, disconnection from the natural world. Again, we are humans, we are animals, we forget that, Harvey. We need to be respecting Mother Nature. So this goes far beyond just, are we eating the right food? Like if we're eating ultra processed food, we know they're full of chemicals. They're not going to be good for us. They're going to physically and emotionally impact us. But are we getting enough sleep? Are we moving our body? What about our screen time? I think another problem in the world is screen time. People are on their phone 8, 9 hours a day and they're complaining that they're depressed, that they're anxious. If we're not getting sunlight through our eyes, it's being screen time instead. If we're not moving our body, sitting down, we're driving all over, open anymore, then we're kind of disrespecting the design of our body. Mother Nature designed us to move our body, to eat natural foods, to be a part of a community, to have sex with our partners, to have friends, to have a tribe, to exercise, to run, to hunt the woolly mammoth, to get outside in the fresh air, to get vitamin D on our skin. So when we live this fake, toxic, processed, convenient life, which in the modern world, technically, someone doesn't even have to leave the house in this modern world. You can get food delivered to your door. You can get all of your connections on social media. You can go on porn to get your sexual kicks. You don't have to actually have a person anymore. This is like dystopian. This is a dystopian nightmare that we are living in right now, and it's actually impacting people's mental health. We've got fake food. We've got fake community on social media. We've got fake sex with porn. We've got fake lifestyles with TVs and Netflix. We're literally living in a modern day matrix right now. So we need to look at that and go, am I connected to the natural world? Do I see people? Do I get outside? Do I breathe fresh air? Do I sleep properly? Do I exercise? Do I eat proper food? If we're not doing that, it's going to create consequences. Number six, the comparison. We mentioned it before. Comparison to society. There could be a lack of order in our life due to that because we're comparing ourselves to other people, putting ourselves in this pecking order. I'm way down here. They're up there. I'm not good enough. And then the eating issues or the coping mechanisms could be a result of this comparison in society, not feeling good enough, whether that's through body shape, body size, or whether it's through social norms. I'll just be honest, I've got a lot of clients who are female in that 40 to 60 age category. For whatever reason, I never intended on it, but a lot of my clients come from that demographic. I've worked with thousands of people. I've saw this correlation time and time again. I've worked with a lot of women who expected to be married with kids by the time they were 40. I work with a lot of women who expected to be retired by the time they were maybe 50 or 60, and then I work with a lot of kids who thought, a lot of women who thought they would have got married and that would be it. That ended up getting divorced and now they're single and alone at 50-year-old, and it's very hard for them to deal with. Again, that's not their fault. I'm simply making an observation here, but I see this correlation quite a lot. So a lot of this comparison can come down to societal norms and expectations. Well, I thought I would just get married, have kids, and that would be it. And then it didn't work out. And oh my God, what do I do now? It's like this identity crisis I have to go through. A lot of that is created by following this path that you thought was laid out for you, and it's not really your path. So it's unmet expectations as far as societal norms. And the last one, which probably you want to talk about, connection from hope in the future. If we don't have hope, we can't cope. If we don't have anything to work towards, we're not going to try. If we don't have anything to be excited about, what would we get out of bed in the morning? And I think so many people are stuck in survival. They just go to work, they work 40, 50 hours a week, they feed their kids, they pay the car bills, they pay the mortgage. They're so exhausted on a weekend, they just sit and binge it all weekend, and they go back to do it all again on Monday. And they've been living like this for decades, just Monday to Friday, blow some steam off on the weekend. And if they're lucky, they'll save up enough money to get 1 week off to get pissed in Ibiza and then come back and do it all again. That's no way to live. And so many people, especially in working class Britain, just the modern world, that's their life. They're working just to pay the bills, just to survive. And they're wondering why they're struggling. They've got no hobbies. They've got no goals. They're not working towards anything. They're not excited about anything. They've got no life mission. They don't feel like they've got a purpose. And if I hear these words come out of a client's mouth, maybe I ask them, what's your purpose? What are you looking forward to? What are you most excited about in the next 12 months? What are your long-term life goals? And I don't just mean lose weight. I mean, like, what are you working towards? They can't answer the question, Harvey. They cannot answer the question. Say, I don't know. I don't know what I'm working towards. I don't know what would make me happy. I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know. I don't even know who I am. I'm like, that's the problem. Maybe we need to rediscover that. So that's how we create order in our life. We look at those 7 frameworks. The job, can we create order with that? Can we be more fulfilled? Hobbies, can we express ourselves and actually feel like we do something that's enjoyable rather than just look to escape pain? What are our relationships like? Are relationships all over the place? Can we create some order with that? What about past traumas? Have we suppressed them our whole life? Do we need to integrate them? Do we need to learn better ways to regulate our emotion? And the way that you get over trauma, it's not that all the things that have happened to me I forget about and they no longer hurt me. It's look at who I've become despite what happened to me. That's the framework for overcoming trauma. Look at what I've created despite what I've been through. No one ever got over trauma by, oh, that doesn't hurt me anymore. It'll always hurt you. It'll always impact you. But you've got to create a framework to move forward and say, despite what happened to me, how do I want my life to look? And you've got to get help, whether it's psychotherapy, therapy, spiritual help. You've got to get some help in order to integrate those traumas. Integration is the key. Hope for a better future. Am I working towards anything in my life, personally, professionally, career-wise, job-wise, emotional-wise, body-wise, health and fitness-wise? What goals have I got? Is it about having a family? Is it about retiring at 50? Is it about, making sure I can book that holiday, that's on my bucket list, just having something to get your teeth into. The comparison to other people, looking at how disempowering that can be, maybe changing your beliefs around comparison and how you use that to your advantage, looking at the way you live, your natural world, your environment, the way you eat, the way you recover, the way you rest, your exercise, how processed of a life are you living? That is how you get over disordered eating. You create order in your life. So the need to cope with food or to restrict food to control your body, it's not there because you've created order in your life. So that is how I help people overcome disordered eating habits. We absolutely look at their habits and say, here's how you can improve your eating. Here's the strategies to overcome emotional eating. Here's how to, how to eat better, how to eat enough. A lot of people fear gaining weight, so they restrict to get them to prove to themselves you can eat enough without gaining weight. You don't have to be scared of eating, help them work through those fears around food. But also, there's this whole other thing is that you've got to work on your life. So eating disorders are created by a lack of order in one's personal life. So if we want to create a better way of eating, we want to get rid of the disorder, then we need to create order in our life. That's the thing. In the medical community, the NHS, they unfortunately don't talk about this. It's just treat the symptoms, treat the symptoms. Do you know what their method of treating people with binge eating disorder is, Harv? Put them on a diet. That's their method. You know how many people I get who come to me and say, Sam, I went to the NHS, the Doc Valley put us on this binge recovery program, and they put me on an 800-calorie diet. Their attempt at solving binge eating disorder is to put them on extreme diets to lose weight. That's not going to solve the eating habits. We deal with it the total wrong way.
Yeah, that's like, I think it's very easy when like messages like this are shared. Like, it's so easy to get caught up in like that level of like, losing hope and belief that things will get better when like that's the go-to solution by like something that you could just rely on, or should be able to rely on to help you get better. But there's so many interesting points in there, and even just as you were speaking, like I had a few realizations myself of like, I've got stuff that I'm working towards and I'm excited about. Just not enough. Like, I like to get my teeth stuck into stuff, and I've done before and spread myself way too thin. But like, I feel like I've got wavelength to deal with some of these things and really get that to clamp down and get into that. And even what you were saying about hobbies as well, like just for context for everyone listening, like this is something that you were telling me about about 3 years ago, not long after a breakup, and kind of getting back into that, like rediscovering myself, new environment, new sort of things like that. And honestly, like that has been something that's never left. He's always around like hobbies, and it could be something so simple, so trivial, like you don't have to go and climb peaks every weekend if you don't want to. Like, it can be stuff that's really, really simple, like going to the shop, going and cooking a nice meal on the weekend. Things as simple as that. Gym, classes, going for a walk. There is very few things, and I know you're the same as me with this. There's very few things in this world that make me much happier than headphones in, walk, and listening to a podcast, getting, like you said, multiple boxes, like having a level, or even being on the phone to someone, having like a level of connection, having, fresh air, vitamin D, sunlight. Like, it's these basic things. And going back to one of the first points, which actually probably ties this in a bow very nicely, it was not about reinventing the wheel. I don't think anything, although quite shocking, I don't think anything you've said is not groundbreaking, but it's very simple.
It's just overlooked, isn't it? These things are always on the table because we like to complicate things as a society. But like, I'm having these complex emotional issues. That must mean there's some sort of brain chemistry issue. There's something wrong with me. There's some sort of like big scientific. It's like, no, yes, you're a spiritual being. You're made out of energy, like everything. Energy can't be created nor destroyed, but just particles, atoms, all smashing together. We're a bag of meat with chemicals flowing through. We have a brain that's somehow conscious. Who knows what consciousness is? But hey, we're a conscious being in this meat bag, right? And when we're not looking after ourselves, that meat bag's going to break down and our brain's going to suffer. So simplify it. Those things I've mentioned are all obvious things that are on the table that we're just not talking about as a society. And also, if people listening for context, you want to know where I got that from, Johan Hari, Lost Connection. I didn't make that up. That is a framework that I now apply, and I've tweaked it for emotional eating, but it's basically based off his framework of this is what creates anxiety and depression. Those 7 areas. Those 7 areas in life. And one of the simplest ways to start, if you're currently struggling with your mental health, a hobby. That's the You cannot overcome past trauma in a day. That's not going to happen. That's going to be an ongoing thing. It might take decades. I'm serious. It might be an ongoing thing forever. But you could have a hobby yesterday. You could do something for yourself now. That's a great start. My hobby at the minute, I'm really into it. I've got my training, my exercise, but I realized that for years and years and years, I associated a hobby as it had to be like exercise, and that caused me to be burnt out. So some of my hobbies right now related to that: exercise, kickboxing. I go kickboxing twice a week. I absolutely love it. Walking the dog. That's been a game changer for me lately. My dog passed away last year, and he was 16. So for about 6 years, he wasn't even an ability to walk because he had bad hips. So he was more like a house dog for about 6 years. Didn't really go out. So I missed out on that. Taking my dog out as a hobby of mine. I've got a kayak. I've got a paddleboard that I use in the summer months. I live at South Shields, so it's right on the coast. So I do that in the summer months. Again, I'm going to actually get the bike out this weekend and pump the tires up and start going on my bike again. That's a great hobby. But I had one thing missing, and that was a hobby that slowed me down. All of my hobbies were fast. I used to fish as a kid. I used to go fishing all the time. I recently got back into it. And for me, that hits the box of solitude. I'm alone. Don't have to worry about anyone. It's interesting because it's connected to nature. Like I'm interested in animals, fish, species. I like being outside in a beautiful lake or a river or a pond. It's very calm. You hear the birds chirp in the trees. It's the water. It's very therapeutic, and it doesn't take away energy. Like if I have a day off work and I'm like, right, I want to do something like a hobby. If I go on a 20-mile bike ride, I have a blast. But that doesn't exactly lead me in a better position the next day to be like emotionally recharged. I'm like exhausted. So I realized there was something missing. So I think a lot of people hear the word hobbies and they think, oh, well, I go to the gym. I'm like, it's not enough. So I say to my clients, yes, a hobby, yes, but not exercise. I think exercise should be separate from your hobbies. I think we need a hobby that slows us down. We need a hobby that regulates us. We need a hobby that calms us. And sometimes it needs to be in solitude because the real version of you, that doesn't come out when you're around people. That comes out when you're on your own. The persona, that's a Jungian concept, right? Your persona, it's the masks that we put on. Most of us are putting masks on. I'm essentially putting a mask on right now for you and your audience, Holly. I'm trying to get you guys to like me. I'm trying to get you guys to resonate with me. I'm trying to educate you. I'm playing a character right now. It's definitely a part of me. I'm not being inauthentic, but I'm putting on a mask. We all do. So how do we take all of those masks off and actually discover and determine who we really are? Got to be alone. Got to do something on our own. Got to do something that's just us. So I like to link hobbies in with like play. Like as children, we used to just play and we had a blast. And if you're listening and you've got kids right now, you might stumble in on a room on your kids. They're just in this make believe little fantasy world. They're talking to their Barbie dolls, or they're playing with their little trucks, or they're just talking to themselves. And that is a beautiful moment. It's a beautiful moment. I don't even have kids, but I sometimes be in a coffee shop or I'll just be walking around and I see a little kid and they're just in this make believe little world. And I'm like, oh my God, that resonates with me. I'm like, that's how we are supposed to be. Just authentically, beautifully ourselves, where we're just not bothered about the world. All the masks are off and we're just our one little unique individual. So a hobby is the easiest place to start. I think that should be the treatment plan for anyone who's depressed. It's like, right, what hobbies have you got? None. Right, let's work towards you getting some hobbies because that can create just a little bit of fulfillment in your life. It's not going to solve all your problems, but it's a start.
Yeah. And I think what you said there and the kind of the thought that I'm having of it as well is this idea of like yin and yang. And you've got your, like you said, for yourself, you've got your fishing, you've also got your kickboxing. Very energy charged, very differently. Like said, you can be, sitting there relaxing, sat in a pond or by a river, but then you've also got the point where you're kicking the shit out of people. Those are very, charged very differently, but they also can go together. And like we're talking about order and stuff like that. It's looking at, well, actually there is a level of like balance there, which is
Balance is hard, I must admit. I've still struggled to this day. How can I balance having a relationship? I've been with my partner 8 years. We definitely want to move forward, take the next level very, very soon. And, you can probably imagine what that is. But then how can I balance that with the business? And then I'll go all in on my relationship and my business will suffer. And I'll go all in on my hobbies and my business will suffer. I'm like, I drive myself crazy sometimes, hobby, trying to balance everything. And I think sometimes there is no balance. I think you've just got to have multiple options up your sleeve and you've got to learn when to pull out each option. There'll be months where I'm like, right, I'm probably not going to get fishing for a couple of weeks. I need to double down on this work. There'll be months where I'm like, right, I'm not going to be able to get to kickboxing. I've been quite frustrated with kickboxing training the last few months. I've had a few injuries, but also the exact times when the classes are, I've just had to do some work that's going to propel me forward. So I've been prioritizing business this month rather than training as much, but that's not always the case. But balance is hard. I don't believe there is a perfect formula. I just believe we have to be aware of these options up our sleeve, and I think we just have to play the game. Sometimes we need to push and we need to work hard. Sometimes we need to pull back. I think, I'll have to finish on this quote because I do have to run for a call very soon. There's a great book, Robert Greene, 48 Laws of Power. Quite a dark book. There's definitely some darkness in that. It's like a lot of like emotional like psychology, how to like manipulate people in business and things like that. I didn't read it for that. I read it for the strategies because he talks about powerful strategies, and his final law of power is to be formless. And what he meant by that was it's to always be willing to adapt your plan in the moment based off what's in front of you. Yeah. I've got a book on that shelf as well by Sun Tzu, The Art. It's a 2,000-year-old military strategy book, but it applies to the modern world about how to apply strategies. And he says something similar. He says the goal is not to win every battle, it's to be in a position of maneuverability. So you have to be willing to maneuver. Obviously, I'm into my kickboxing things as well, so it's linked to that. But yeah, if I'm kickboxing, the goal isn't to right, let's practice this on the pad. We'll do a double jab, right hand with a left body kick. Well, let's say I'm in a fight, right? I do the jab, the guy ducks out the way and kicks me in the head. All of a sudden, my plan of I'll do a double jab, right hand body kick, it's out the window. So what's the point in practicing these long combinations? Is what my coach told me. When you see these boxing guys, see Tyson Fury do these 55 million punch combo when they're doing all this. He's like, that's crap. That is absolutely not applicable to a real fight because is your partner going to throw that when you duck and then you throw that? No, you don't even know. So what's the goal? To always be in a position of maneuverability. So that means adapt, pivot, be an absolute specialist at saying, what's the circumstances in front of me? What's the best option? And that best option will differ day to day because circumstances change day to day. So everything's about strategy. Everything's about, I think balance is a bit of a weird concept. That's the goal. It's a bit of an idealistic goal, though. I think more of a realistic goal is to say, I'm going to aim for balance, but some days I'll have to push one way, some days I'll have to pull another. And I'm all right with that. I think the best thing to do is have your strategies, have your weapons up your sleeves, know what your hobbies are, know what you like to do with your family, know what goals you've got with your relationship, know what things you need to be working on when it comes to your mindset and your personal development, have little hacks up your sleeve, like getting in nature, like, all those sorts of things. Have a long-term goal, have a short-term goal. Just have all of your strategies based off that framework that I've spoken about to create as much order and clarity in your life as possible, but also accept you can't work on all of them at the same time. And I think that's been the best thing I've had to get my head around. I drove myself crazy for years trying to find this balance. And it'll be like, I'll smash business, but my relationship will suffer. Then I'll sort my relationship out, and then business will go down. And then I'll sacrifice my hobbies to smash the business. And now I feel unfulfilled and want to burn my business to the ground. And then I'll procrastinate on my work tasks and I'll take the day off and go fishing. And now I'm behind and I'm anxious about work. I'm like, oh my God, how the hell do I get this right? And I don't think there is any right. I think the goal is to just be formless, to adapt in the moment, to be willing to strategize based off what we think's in front of us, and that, use your eyes. In martial arts, my coach said, use your eyes. If you've got this idea, want to throw your double jab, left hand, left body kick, but the moment you test that jab out, your partner seems to parry it, then that's not going to be a useful combination. So use your eyes. Maybe fake a jab, get your partner to get ready for the parry, then you come over the top with the right hand when he's dropped his guard. So you bait and switch. You test theories out. You see what works. So everything's strategy. You can apply all those strategies to your real life as well. So there you go.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. Like, there's so many good reminders in there, and just ultimately new insights, new ways of looking at things. And I think a big takeaway, and it's something that we've spoken about before at length, is this idea of kind of fuck about and find out. Sometimes that's kind of a
Trial and error. Say that about emotional eating clients. Like, Sam, what's the best diet for me? I'm like, right. Through trial and error, we'll determine how many calories is good for your body. And the goal is to try and get them to maintain weight, right? Because before you lose weight, you've got to stop gaining it. That's one thing that people miss out on. They want to go from, I'm a binge eater and I've been gaining weight slow and steady for like 3 years now. All of a sudden, I want to lose weight. I'm like, you haven't even earned the right to lose weight yet because you've never stopped gaining it. Let's go through a period of maintenance, get your body in order, figure out how many calories you eat. How do I know that? Not through a James Smith calorie tracking app, which I'm sure is a great starting point, but it can't be guaranteed that that's what your calories are. How do you determine how much you can eat? Trial and error. So trial and error is like one of the best strategies across the board in life, not just with dieting and losing weight and eating habits. What works for me? Do you know the only way you can find out what works for you? It's to find out what didn't work. And by finding out what didn't work, it'll reveal this is the best option. So everything's trial and error, everything's strategy, I'll just be formless and adapt. And if that isn't working, I'll readjust. And if that is working, I'll double down on it and I'll tweak and I'll tinker it and I'll just maneuver when I need to. That's life. And if you start applying that life, you'll be successful across the board.
Amazing. I know you've got to go, mate. So I'll let you crack on. Just before we finish up, though, where can people find out more about you?
Great question. Facebook is probably the social media platform I'm most active on, and that's just Sam Gibson, emotional eating coach. It's blue ticked, authenticated, so you'll know it's me. Also Instagram, Sam Gibson Limitless, I believe, is my Instagram handle. If you are someone who struggles with emotional eating, maybe binge eating or other types of disordered eating, I actually have a free book. It's in a podcast audiobook style, How to Stop Binge Eating and Finally Get in Shape. I believe if you go on my website, which is www.samgibsonlimitless.co.uk, there will be a link that you can type your name in, type your details in, and you will be sent a free copy of that book. That is the best way for me to teach you all of the frameworks that I've taught people on how to overcome emotional eating over the last 7 or 8 years. So those are the best places to find me: Facebook, Instagram, and also listen to my free audio.
Amazing. Cheers, buddy. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much, mate.